In the Life is funded in part by the H. Van Ameringen Foundation, Arcus Foundation, the estate of Richard W. Weiland, and by the annual support of In the Life members like you.
Coming up, actors, writers, and activists speak out on In the Life, the best of our series, A Conversation With. Kathleen Turner and Edward Albee talk theater.
So you write Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. You know what you're expected to write next? Son of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
Of course.
Julian Bond and Jonathan Capehart discuss gay rights as civil rights.
The right to be married is a civil right, and I believe civil rights ought to be extended to everybody.
And Julianne Moore and Christine Vachon take on Hollywood.
I think Todd Haynes said something once, which is somebody asked him if Hollywood was homophobic.
Right.
And he said, well, it might be, but who cares? Money isn't.
Your humor, your sense of humor, and your sardonic...
In our first conversation, director, author, and star of stage and screen, Kathleen Turner, sits down with legendary playwright Edward Albee.
So you've had some serious reactions and to a lot of your work.
Oh, yeah.
Some good and some not.
Some good and some pretty rotten, too.
Yeah. I was thinking specifically about the Pulitzer Prize for Virginia Woolf.
Which they took away.
Which they took away.
Yeah. But that was okay. You know, I got more mileage out of having that prize taken away than I would have had if I just left it with me, yeah.
What, you're not advocating bad publicity is better than none?
Of course.
What other pieces have suffered in that way?
Well, after I wrote Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which got, you know, eventually a lot of good. Some of the first reviews from those daily newspapers that don't exist anymore, like the Mirror and those things, they were pretty bad. You know, plays that should be seen only by dirty-minded women, or somebody else called it a garbage dump.
Now there have been questions throughout the history of Virginia Woolf and others that that it was originally based on homosexual partners.
That meant to be a play about two gay couples.
Yes, and I can remember what you said to me about it, but...
Well, that was so silly, you know. I'm quite capable of writing a play about gay people if I want to.
Sure.
I've done it. But those two were two straight couples. It was not. Everybody knew I was gay, and so obviously Albee's gay, therefore he must be disguising
yes.
What he's doing.
Right, some kind of subversive message.
But that was, there were a couple of critics.
So how has it changed now?
There were a couple of critics who were very famous for their homophobia.
Yeah.
And they were really slamming at a lot of us. But then the reviews got okay, and we had a decent run with that play. But, so you write Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. You know what you're expected to write next? Son of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
Of course.
Or, you know, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf 2. And then I had 3 absolute commercial disasters. I did an adaptation of James Purdy's wonderful novel, Malcolm, which was greatly admired by 2 people, James Purdy and me, and that was just about it. I wrote a play about theater journalism and critics called The Man Who Had 3 Arms.
Yeah.
And they didn't like that very much either.
What a surprise.
What a surprise. And another one that got blasted. And all of a sudden, I couldn't get a production in New York.
Yeah.
Very interesting. About, 15 years after Virginia Woolf, I couldn't get a production in New York. I was having productions in Europe all the time.
Sure.
And around the country, but I was totally persona non grata in New York because I didn't write Son of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, basically. But then things started to turn around again, and now for a little while, they're being nice to me. Don't know why.
They're being lovely to you, Edward.
Yeah, I know.
Must be your age.
It probably is, yeah. Be nice to the old guy, right?
Yeah, right. Where do you get your inspiration, sir?
I usually say Schenectady.
We're gonna let that one go.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm a writer, therefore I write. I'm a playwright, therefore I write plays. If you write plays, you're supposed to have ideas for plays. I discover every 6 months or so that I'm thinking about a play that I plan to write. I don't know much about it, and I leave it alone.
We've always said your characters find their own words in some ways.
Of course. I have to know the characters so well that I can convince myself that they are talking. I will go to a string quartet and listen to some Beethoven or something, and I will start hearing lines from this play that I want to write.
That's something that always fascinated me. That right at the beginning of rehearsals for Virginia Woolf, you had said that you had wanted to be a composer. And so you heard scenes and as movements, you know, as andante or lento or, you know, all this sort of stuff. And that, in fact, you could close your eyes and listen to how the play went and know if it was on track, if it was right.
Exactly.
If the passage was in tune or on beat.
A play is three things. It's a piece of literature. It is also a scene, a visual experience.
Yes.
And it's also a heard experience.
Oh, indeed.
And so a playwright notates exactly, uses punctuation exactly the way a composer notates.
What about all the changes you've seen in the New York theatrical scene over the years? God, don't you think there have been... It's a completely different atmosphere.
Of course, a totally different atmosphere. That awful thing called commerce is so completely taken over. The problem about live theater is it costs so damn much to put on. So what's happening is we're not getting the complexity of the audience that we really need.
No, not at all.
We're getting rich people. And most people aren't writing specifically or only for that audience.
No, they're writing to be produced.
Yeah, but here's the problem. More and more young playwrights are being said, we're going to have a tryout, or we're going to try out your play. We're going to have a reading of your play. And then we'll tell you what we want you to do with it. You know, if it's a tough play, we'll ask you to soften it a little bit.
Oh, I know that.
You know, take down all the rough edges so it can't hurt anybody.
Yeah, could you be just as awful and as wicked and nice?
And we love it at its complete length, but don't you think it should be a half hour shorter and stuff like that?
Yes, people need to get home.
And the problem is, it's tougher and tougher for young writers to get their work done, and more of them are being asked to compromise, even before the fact.
More commercial.
Yeah, of course. Safer, easier. An audience that goes to the theater for escapism is a different audience than one that goes to engage in thinking about stuff.
So why don't you write more escapism?
Because I don't know how to do it.
I know! Isn't that great?
You know, the only reason half of us don't sell out is because we don't know how.
Agreed.
So what are you doing next?
Well, I wouldn't mind a comedy. Do you know? I mean...
You just did one. It was called Virginia Woolf.
I did. But everybody's been after me for Sweet Bird of Youth. Now, frankly, I don't need two such women back to back.
No.
I'd really like a break in between those two.
I think so.
So I think that's what I'm looking for now. There are a couple new pieces which I'm finding very interesting, but they need work. So whether we can get the work done in time or not.
Well, the right stuff will come along. It always does.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to wait a little bit, but
30 years.
You get it.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks you, honey.
Of the marriage movement, and now she can become an icon.
And now, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and Washington Post editorial writer Jonathan Capehart talks with NAACP Chairman Julian Bond about the intersection of gay rights and civil rights.
You've been chairman of the NAACP since 1998, correct? Right. How has the organization changed or evolved since the civil rights movement?
Well, it has changed focus in a slight way, because we've always had the same focus, which is fighting racial discrimination. We've done that since 1909, and I'm sorry to say we'll probably be doing it for some time in the future.
Let's talk about the time back during the civil rights movement. And you've said that there were many gays and lesbians involved in the movement, of course, and you credited them with shaping your views on gay rights. Did you know Bayard Rustin?
Yes.
Talk about Bayard Rustin. He was part of Dr. King's inner circle. He helped pull off the March on Washington in 1963, and he was gay.
He, as you say, he was just a seminal figure in this movement because King depended on Bayard for so many things. He was King's first educator in nonviolence, and he just expanded King's knowledge of this 100-fold. You know, Bayard wrote the first article ever published under Dr. King's name. I think it was, I'm not sure it was in the Nation magazine, but an article sort of revisiting the Montgomery bus boycott and saying what it meant, and Bayard Rustin wrote that. To say he organized the March on Washington really doesn't give him enough credit. He put this thing together. Now, we're used to, you know, big protests in Washington nowadays. They happen, it seemed, almost every week or so. But this was almost a first. And it was certainly the first involving black people. And it was a first involving bringing people from all over the country here in Washington for this event. And Rustin just was such a superb organizer. He pulled it off and no problem.
You are one of the few prominent members of the civil rights movement to come out full square in favor of gay marriage.
It just seems to be something right to do. It seems to me that the right to be married is a civil right. And I believe civil rights ought to be extended to everybody. Who ought not have these rights? What category of people ought not have these rights? I can't think of one. I've been married twice, and I know what the benefits are, the economic benefits are to a couple. And I don't want to shut other people off from these benefits.
You opened the 20th annual Creating Change Conference, sponsored by the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force. And you said then, quote, "Like race, our sexuality is not a preference. It is immutable, unchangeable, and the Constitution protects us all against prejudices and discrimination based on immutable differences." What do you say to those who flat out disagree with that assessment?
Well, if they seem to be open to some kind of rational argument, then I try to make a rational argument. Your sexuality is an immutable characteristic. It's something you're born with. You don't say, hey, I think I'll be gay. You are gay when you're born, or you're not gay.
So what is the connection between the civil rights movement and the gay civil rights movement as we know it today?
At the bottom, it's these immutable characteristics. You are what you are, and you cannot be discriminated against in this country for what you are. That's the similarity, that's the closeness, and the fact that the black civil rights movement came to public attention before the gay civil rights movement, which is existing at the same time, but I don't think well known to people. These draw from each other, and the gay movement draws tactics and techniques and songs and slogans, as did the Hispanic movement, as did the women's movement. And it's not that these movements are taking from us, because the black movement took from other movements before us. We took from the labor movement. And I never heard of people from the labor movement complaining about this. And for black people to complain about this, we ought to be proud of this. Say, look what we did. We created a model that other people have followed, and they followed it successfully. Good for us.
The widow of Dr. Martin Luther King, that was Coretta Scott King. Did you ever talk about this?
No, I never did. I never talked to her about this, but I quoted her as often as I could. And when she died, and it was announced that Ebenezer Baptist Church, where her husband had been pastor, was too small for the funeral ceremony, and it was instead headed for a church run by a notorious homophobic minister in Atlanta, I decided not to go.
What should gay people know about her that they might not already know?
Well, first, I don't think many of them know that she was this strong advocate for gay rights, for all of the things that gay people want and need. I think her advocacy of these things is relatively unknown. And when I speak to audiences and quote her, I can see some of the people saying, really? You know, happily, but really? And so I think they could learn some more about her. She was in many ways a remarkable person, and to think of her as the wife and widow of Martin Luther King in some ways diminishes her, because she was more than that. She was greater than that. She had a life of her own. She was an independent person. So of course she was the wife. Of course she was the mother. Of course she was the standard bearer after he died. But she was more than that.
Mm-hmm. You have gone basically around the country campaigning against anti-gay marriage amendments in various states. Did you voluntarily do this? Did people come to you and say, you know, we could really use your name and your stature behind this?
Both those things happened. The NAACP is opposed to these amendments. We don't have a position on marriage equality. We're neutral on that, or agnostic on that. But we do oppose these amendments because we think it's wrong to single out any group of people for special treatment. And that's what these amendments do. And so wherever they've raised their heads, we've campaigned against them. And where I've been able to physically go, I've done it myself.
Here's the closing cosmic question. I am a 17, 18-year-old black kid anywhere in the United States. Urban America, rural America, suburban America, exurban America. And I just don't get the connection, that there is even a connection between the civil rights movement that you helped lead and the gay rights movement that I see all sorts of people pushing and leading, from people on television to people in politics, people in business. One, why should I care? And two, what is the connection? Convince me.
The connection is rights. Rights, that's the key word. These are movements for rights. And these are movements to ensure that everyone has these rights. And this 17-year-old kid may not think he's ever going to get married, or if he's straight, is going to marry a woman. But this guarantees his rights. And if he's not interested in his rights, then I wouldn't spend much time talking with him.
Thanks, Mr. Bond.
Thank you.
All those beautiful lesbians.
All those, exactly. That's exactly.
And finally, longtime collaborators, actress Julianne Moore and producer Christine Vachon, discuss lesbian representation, homophobia in Hollywood, and the state of queer cinema.
What do you think the criteria is for Hollywood to get behind a gay story?
I think Todd Haynes said something once, which I've always quoted, which is somebody asked him if Hollywood was homophobic.
Right.
And he said, well, it might be, but who cares? Money isn't. And,
That's great.
And that's the truth.
It's so true.
You know, I think it's the same thing will get Hollywood to get behind a gay story. I mean, look at Milk, you know?
I know. Yeah.
I mean, Milk is a terrific script, a terrific director, and those two things are pretty much all you need to get a terrific cast, which it got.
Well, does queer cinema still exist? Because I feel like there was this sort of period when everybody was like, queer cinema, and I'm like, huh? I mean, I don't feel like...
Well, I think a couple things. I think that it's important to remember that in the early 90s when that phrase was coined, and it was kind of coined around, I think that Sundance in particular, where there was Swoon, an extraordinary film by Christopher Munch called The Hours and the Times, and The Living End, Greg Araki's movie.
Yeah.
And then Poison had been the year before. And I think kind of a couple things. One is, what we have to remember about the early 90s was AIDS. And the sense of urgency that it inspired in a lot of, you know, gay or queer or whatever you want to call them, filmmakers.
Right.
And a sense that, you know, that time was running out and that they had to tell their stories. And a sense that, you know, they weren't, if they didn't tell their stories, nobody would.
Right, exactly.
And also at that time, and even with something like Go Fish, which is much more lighthearted.
Such a charming movie. I
Absolutely.
love that movie.
But even with Go Fish, there was no, I mean, putting that out in the marketplace, I think people are going to go see this movie because it's basically about looking for love. And it doesn't matter, you know, and that was absolutely true. But people are also going to go see that movie because if you were a gay woman, there was nothing else for you to see where you got to see yourself up on screen.
Right.
Now, I think if we released Go Fish today, I don't think anybody, I don't think we'd be able to release it today.
Really?
Well, I think that now
Because?
people have other choices.
Yeah.
You know, they can watch
The L word.
The L word.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All those beautiful lesbians.
Yeah, all those, exactly. That's exactly what my life is like. And
Mine too.
yes. And so, I mean, but also I think there's just much more choice. I mean,
Right.
there's just, you know, there's television shows, there's I mean, and also then, you know, the notion of gay film festivals was a way of bringing a community together that had no other way to gather.
Right.
And honestly now, with the internet and DVDs, it just doesn't feel as
Urgent.
I mean, it just doesn't.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess the idea of what makes a movie gay or not gay, and then there's the idea of like, is there still really, you know, does the notion of a sort of queer cultural cinema exist?
Well, you know, I'm asked that question occasionally too because of my work with these so-called queer
Right.
cinema
Right.
directors and stuff, and I'm like, well, you know, I said I feel like sometimes I feel like it's reductive,
Right.
Because you're sort of you're putting yourself in this little tiny box. When these films that I've made, I feel are about humanity. It's about what it is
Right.
to be alive and to love somebody or to be ostracized or any of those kinds of things. So for me, it's very, very much about all of us.
Right. You know, the queer/gay community has never actually ever embraced the work I've done at the time that I've done it.
Interesting.
Except for Boys Don't Cry. That one I got a free pass on that. That was,
Really?
but Safe, I was criticized for not really addressing the AIDS crisis. You know?
Oh, come on.
And then Swoon was criticized for there was this whole outcry at that time about the whole idea of negative images that
Because they're murderers, so you shouldn't have it.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And there was and then remember there's the boycott of Basic Instinct because Sharon Stone's murdering character was a lesbian. Although, you know, I was a little like, I don't know, you know, she's beautiful. She murders rich, awful men.
That's
and
right, yeah, so you could
it's a
say
positive
an
image for me, yeah. So, and then Go Fish was criticized because then I thought, oh, they can't get mad at me about this.
Yeah, sweet
I mean,
little,
come on.
you know, girls holding
As being
hands kind of movie.
ageist.
Ages.
Yeah, not
okay.
having, you know, nobody in it was like over 22.
You're all just adorable young
Right.
things.
So, Julie.
Yes, Christine. Yes.
You have remained committed to doing smaller movies. You don't seem like you're afraid of first-time directors.
Not in the least.
And that's really unusual. And you know, but you still also do, you know, you still do some of those moneymakers too.
You bet I do. You know, an interesting thing has happened actually. When I first started doing, early in my career, when I was kind of doing both, there weren't a lot of people doing both.
Right.
It was sort of like you had to choose one or the other.
Right.
And I always did it. It was purely practical for me because you know when you do an independent, I would choose an independent film that I wanted to do, and you don't get paid.
Right.
So I didn't get paid. So I would say, well, I want to get paid. So I would do something where I'd be able to, you know, make a mortgage payment or something.
Right.
But what has happened that's very interesting is now because financing for independent film has changed so dramatically, it's no longer this idea that you can make a movie made Safe for just under $1 million.
That is correct.
And there was no expectation that Safe would make money. The
Right.
idea in the early days was you were just going to make back what you,
Right.
had paid, and that was okay. Now, what has happened is because people are so reluctant to finance independent film at all because they feel like, you know, how is this going to ever be effective? They depend on actors who have some box office,
Right.
particularly foreign box office. So my doing these bigger Hollywood movies has actually kept my career alive in independent film.
Right.
Because that means not only do I
Right.
want to do something, but they go, oh, you know what, Julia's worth overseas,
Right.
and I can finance a film.
And I don't think there's any danger now. I mean, I think when I first started making movies, there was that thing of like straight actors didn't like to play gay.
Really?
That really was, actually, I think what was more likely was gay actors didn't like to play gay.
Right,
because they were so anxious that.
But don't you think also, I mean, I think it's really interesting, I mean, because we both have children around the same age. I feel like the world has changed so much, and our attitudes towards sexuality have changed so much. And our kids are growing up in a world where lots of people in their class have two mommies or two daddies. And where my children will say, when we play the game of life, they say, do you want to be married to a girl or a boy?
Right.
Routinely. Because they know that you can be married to either.
Right.
So I think that's
well,
seeping
actually, you can't be married to either.
Well,
But,
I know.
But anyway.
I know, but you know what I mean?
Yes.
They think.
Right.
I mean, we're sort of working that attitude toward
Right.
that, that in some places and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Yeah. But what would it take for Hollywood to produce a movie with a lesbian protagonist?
I really have to believe, and this may simply just be the only way I can do what I do, I really do believe that great material finds its way somehow to the top, and it somehow gets made. Now, there's certainly been movies that I've spent, as you well know, a very long time trying to make. But I do believe that great material will attract great actors and will somehow, and it's not like Savage Grace made $20 million, but I know that movie's going to be around and people are going to continue to talk about it, and that it's going to be something eventually that we'll all be very proud to have in the long body of work.
That's right.
That they'll list, when we're getting when I'm getting my Irving Thalberg and you're getting your.
I'll present it to you.
Exactly.
That's right.
Thank you for watching In the Life. To learn more about the issues in tonight's stories and how they affect you, visit our website at inthelifetv.org. You can also watch extended interviews, sign up for monthly air date alerts, and download past episodes 24/7.
When do you think the last time we saw each other was?
I don't know. I remember. The only thing I remember about us is I remember the first time we had dinner together.
At lunch, actually.
No, it was a dinner, and it was in Miami, Florida.
Oh, gosh, you're right.
Yeah.
Oh, but that's when I was doing Tallulah down in Palm Beach or something.
We're going down West Street, just south of Canal Street. There's a building that's all boarded up, and there's a whole line of cardboard there. And somebody has printed on that, "You gotta have a swine to show you where the truffles are." Edward Albee.
Isn't that wonderful?
That quote from Virginia Woolf. Isn't that nice?
Well, it takes a swine to find it, yes. Well, that's another thing.
No, the line is, you got to have a swine to show you where the truffles are.
All right, well, I'm sure you're right.
In the Life is funded in part by the H. Van Ameringen Foundation, Arcus Foundation, the estate of Richard W. Weiland, and by the annual support of In the Life members like you.